When did you go to your first reptile show?
I think back in 2016 when I was a senior in high school. That was, I think, Taylor was my first reptile show.
Welcome Adventures. In this episode, I speak with Brandi. I met Brandi at the Saline show in February. We discussed the show, how she picked the location, its previous location, all the exotic pets she's owned, and even her day job. Buckle up and join us. To the music! Adventures. In this podcast, I have Brandi from Saline Reptile and Exotic Animal Expo. Please introduce yourself, if you don't mind.
Yeah, hi. So I'm Brandi. As you heard, I run the Saline Exotic Animal Expo, and I also run the Jackson Reptile Expo, which is where I initially started out with. Due to various reasons, we had to move it over to Saline, and now we're bringing a few back to Jackson. But anyways, um, yeah, I'm like only 26 years old, and I got really inspired to do these shows and stuff like that because of the amount of joy they bring me and my family and my kid. My kid loves all these animals. So I wanted to bring that to more people and stuff like that. So I was like, I got this crazy idea. I was thinking about it for a couple years. I was like, hey, I want to do a reptile expo, and yeah, and I went ahead and did it and been working really hard at it and trying to make it the best it can be for the vendors and the public alike.
Okay. So, how would you define yourself as an expo promoter?
So, I mean, obviously I run the expos and stuff like that. I don't know, I really enjoy animals. I enjoy the outdoors and stuff like that. Like trying to think how best to describe myself. I always get a little what's the word I'm looking for? Kind of lose my train of thought when I get asked that because I'm not really sure how to describe myself, but I'm a fun person. I feel like I'm really easygoing, really easy to get along with. Um, yeah, like I said, I like the outdoors. I love the animals, obviously. I'm a mom, so I work full time and do these expos and stuff like that. So my life is just constantly go, go, go. But it's fun.
What do you do when you're working otherwise?
So I actually work at a grow facility. So I work with plants of the special kind. But yeah, I do that. It's a lot of fun. I enjoy the work. It's constantly like moving, doing something different, which is something that I really enjoy doing instead of being like stationary at a job. There's always something like a little different. It's not the same day in and day out. So it's fun. I really enjoy it. And then by the time I get home, I'm super tired. So I just like try to chill and relax the best I can. But with having a 4.5-year-old son, don't really get much of a break.
So, what was your first exotic pet?
My very first one was a leopard gecko. I had her, I can't, oh gosh, I'm trying to remember what I named her. This was a while ago when I was a kid. Um, but I'll be honest, I was kind of nervous of holding her, as a kid because I'm like, okay, their tails can drop. So I'm like, if I scare her, her tail's gonna drop and she's gonna lose her tail. And I was like so afraid to like hold her, so I just watch her. I just just feed her, watch her, stuff like that. I was only like 9 at the time, and back then I lacked a lot of the proper information on them because it just wasn't available like it is now. But I loved her. I had her for, I want to say, about 10 years, and then she ended up passing away, I think just due to old age. So just woke up and she was fast asleep in her enclosure. So and then for a while, I just didn't have exotics. I had your normal like cats, dogs, rabbits, chickens, goats, everything in between. um, and then about 3 years ago, I got back into reptiles, and I've just kind of dove like head into it. And now I've got like 30 something now, which is like mourning geckos. I got emerald swifts. I got crocodile skinks, which I'm working on a breeding project with to do more captive breeding of them. I got lychees. I have gargoyles and crusteds. And then I got some amphibians too. So, but
Okay,
yeah, that's
that's a
about what I've
lot.
got right now. And I'm hoping to get some more in the future.
Okay. How do you take care of all that stuff? You've got
Yeah.
work and all these shows and all these reptiles and a child, and
hmm
you have time for these reptiles? Apparently, you do, huh? And even more.
Oh yeah. Yeah, I don't know how, but I do. Sometimes I am running on fumes, which is like actually most of the time. But I don't know. I just every night, after my kid goes to bed, I will sit and just watch my animals and take care of them, stuff like that. And it brings so much just like peace and stuff like that. Um these animals just they just make me happy. Life is stressful and complicated, and these animals aren't. They're not complicated, and they're there, they're living, they're doing their thing, and it's just peaceful to watch, I guess. I don't if that makes any sense. And I love interacting with them too.
When did you go to your first reptile show?
I think back in 2016 when I was a senior in high school,
Hmm.
that was, I think, Taylor was my first reptile show. And then the second one I ever went to was Kalamazoo, and then there was one down in Toledo,
Hmm.
but I'm not sure which show it was in Toledo because there was a few of them down there. But yeah, I mean, it was amazing. My first experience at Taylor, like, I was just like, oh my God, all these animals, like, I've never seen before. It is just amazing, and I got like a couple turtles and, because I had like a pond and stuff, like an outdoor pond. So I put them out in the pond during the summer, brought them in for the winter and stuff like that. And then I realized turtles are a lot more work than what they are made out to be. So me being 18, 19, I had these turtles for a few years, and when you experience these different things, these things with these animals, like you find what you like and what's not your most favorite. And I love the turtles, but they just weren't my favorite. So I ended up finding them new homes, and then I ended up being, I didn't have reptiles for a little bit there. Then I ended up getting my gargoyle from Ellison Reptiles, and it's just I've been hooked ever since with like geckos, and I'm starting to venture more into other types of lizard species. So
Okay. So, what made you think you could put on a reptile show?
As I mentioned earlier, they brought so much joy to me. They brought a lot of joy to my family. And I think the turning point was my grandmother, who 10 years ago wouldn't even go near a reptile with like a 10-foot pole. She was terrified of them. She ended up really enjoying my gargoyle gecko that I have, who is named Echo, and my son named her Echo because he couldn't say gecko. He kept saying Echo. So I was like, okay, it's Echo now. But anyways, I got my grandma to hold Echo, and next thing I know, she's just allowing Echo to crawl all over her. She is nothing but smiles and happiness. And every time I get the gecko out, she's like, I want to hold it. Like, give me the gecko. And I was just like, man, this is crazy, to see my grandma go from, being so against them to absolutely loving them and loving to hold them. And I was just like, I want to bring that experience to more people who may not know much about these animals or never been to a reptile show before. So I was like, I'm going to bring one to Jackson. And it just grew from there. It's just been a great experience and something I'm very thankful to be able to do.
So, how long ago did Jackson start?
So the very first show started in 2022. We did like a test show, and so we had one, I want to say, oh goodness, was it July? I want to say it was July of 22 that we had our first show, just to kind of test the waters and see if it's something that the community there would actually enjoy. And the first show was really great. We had like 500 people through the doors, and might not have been as much as some of the shows in Michigan, but I mean, for the first show, we're like, okay, this has got potential. And so we planned out the rest of the year for 23, and we put on the first show in January. We had like 1,000 people through the doors. The second show we had like 900. Um, March was really weird because we ended up having a massive snowstorm the night before the show. And honestly, we were just like, do we cancel? Do we keep it going? And we're like, screw it, we're gonna keep it going. If vendors still want to come to the show, we'll put it on. And obviously, the numbers were a lot lower because we had a foot of snow outside from the night before, but we still had almost 400 people through the doors, and it was great. We kept going, and then we ended up finding out the news that that the event center itself wrote up a permanent contract with another company. And so they're like, well, with this contract, you won't be able to use the building anymore. And we're like, great. So we could finish out the year, but we had to find another venue to go to continue in 24. So that's why we moved it over to Saline. But we've had a lot of people demand, or yeah, like they were like, bring a show back to Jackson. Like, we loved the show. Please bring it back. Not all of us can travel, all the way to Saline due to, certain reasons. And so we're like, okay, let's bring a show back. We contacted several places. They just didn't work out because the size of the venue just wasn't large enough, or they didn't have many dates available. But we ended up going back to the fairgrounds where we initially had it we wanted to see if they had any openings in their other newer building. And that building is like basically booked out 2 years in advance, maybe even three. But they did have some dates available on Sundays where we could have a show. So we're like, okay, let's at least bring back a few shows for the year because we do have an established customer base, and kind of just left him hanging, to be honest, when we had to move, and we feel bad about it. But we got some shows back, so at least people can stock up on supplies during each show and, just bring that back to the community. They really they wanted it back, and a lot of people were really upset when we left. So we're excited to bring that back to Jackson too.
So how did you choose these particular locations?
When choosing a location, you have to think about like population density. You have to think about how easy is it to access this venue. If you have to go out into the middle of nowhere, like on a country road, you might not get as much traffic, right? So we chose a high traffic area, higher population density, and then you have to just advertise, 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 because if you don't advertise, you're not going to get the word out. Like, new people are not going to know about this show, and it's not going to bring more people in. So there's a lot of factors to consider. Basically, picking a good location where a lot of people are is your biggest thing. You got to get the people in, because you got to make your vendors happy. If you're not getting the numbers to the doors, that's less opportunity for vendors to make their sales, and they're not going to want to stay. So it's really important to make sure that you get those numbers through the door to make the vendors really happy. you know but I guess, whatever we're doing, it's working, because we get a really good numbers to the doors for our vendors. And like this past show was like Celine. The first couple shows we did see some people leaving with stuff, but there's a lot of education going on, and all the vendors knew what this meant. There was people asking questions, they were staying, they were listening, and even though they weren't buying, they knew that eventually those people are going to come back and buy. And this past month we had so many people leaving with animals and supplies and stuff like that, because they did come back. They came back because they were ready and prepared. And it was just amazing to see.
This was your third show at that location?
Yes, our third show. We don't have one for April,
Okay.
just because we couldn't get a date for it,
Okay.
but we do have one come May.
Mhm.
It'd be May 18th is our next show. And it does fall on the same day as Kalamazoo, unfortunately, but we're very limited with the dates we could get, moving to a larger building on the same grounds. We should still get a really good turnout. We got a lot of vendors still signed up, and I think we're still at like 40, 50 vendors signed up for the show. So it's still going to be a really good show and very sizable.
How do you pick the dates?
So when you go to pick dates, like we don't want to step on anybody else's toes because there are shows that have been going on a lot longer than ours, like 10, 20 years. And we don't want to step on their toes. They're established. They've been working their butts off to get their shows to where it is. So when we initially started these shows back in Jackson, we're like, okay, this weekend is always Taylor. This weekend is almost always Kalamazoo. Kalamazoo's dates do change just a little bit, like between a week, you know. Sometimes it's like the third week, sometimes it's the fourth week. So we're like, okay, those days really aren't open. Certain Sundays weren't open because you have like Grand Rapids and I think Birch Run is on Sundays. I could be wrong. But, you know, so we're like, okay, it looks like the first Saturday is basically open. So we're like, let's be like Taylor in a sense of being reliable in the days. You know, like there's is always a second Saturday. So we're like, let's try to be the first Saturday so people don't really have to think about it. They just know. But with moving to a new location, you know, we tried to get the first Saturdays and we did. But after the first show in Saline, realizing that the first building just wasn't large enough to hold the amount of people that wanted to come to the show, we're like, okay, let's see if we can move into one of the bigger buildings on the same, you know, grounds. And fortunately they had all but 2 months where we could still get that first Saturday. But May and June we had to switch dates because they just didn't have the availability on that first Saturday. But hopefully come next year we'll still have it on the first Saturday of every month because we'll book a little sooner and be a little more prepared now that we know what to expect for the area.
What are your goals?
Goals? Oh boy, just to provide a very quality show that people can rely on. You know, like they go to the show and they don't have to worry if they buy something from a vendor and it could be potentially sick. You know, like we have all seen some shows where some vendors don't have the best looking animals. So we want to make sure that we have vendors there that offer the quality that people should get. And so that's why we vet our vendors. You know, we have very strict rules and regulations that's a mile long. Like you ask any of our vendors, and it's a very long list of rules and regulations that they have to follow for our show. And basically that's just our goal is to provide something that's quality and, you know, gives people everything that they could. It's like basically a one-stop shop. Now we're still working on that. We're still trying to get certain vendors in, but I think we're definitely on the right track to provide everything that people would need when they come to the show. So,
Do you
yeah.
limit types of vendors? Like you can't have so many frozen thawed mice, or you can't have too many ball python vendors, or do you just do it based on the quality of the vendors?
So we do try to limit how many of each vendor there is. So like we do have some non-animal vendors and we have some that are 3D printers and stuff like that. And basically we are trying to not have an overabundance of a certain type of vendor. Obviously, there's a lot of ball python breeders, a lot of really great ones out there, and we've established our regulars. And so now, basically, they come back to the show every single month. We do try to limit the amount of like certain vendors through like kind of like a selection. Like, okay, we have an opening. This particular vendor kind of bowed out, you know, due to personal reasons, things change, you know, whatever. And then we're like, okay, we can replace it. We have someone on a wait list. We can replace them with, this month, right? But we do we do tell people like, hey, right now we don't need another breeder of this, as we've got a lot more, and it's just more competition and makes it harder for each vendor to make a sale. Because if you got 15 ball python breeders or 15 crested, that's a lot of choices for people to make, and it's gonna hurt all those vendors in the long run, because when you have so many choices, there's gonna be a lot less sales for each vendor. So trying to limit the amount of species specific vendors eventually does help each vendor in the long run by limiting that. And that's basically what we're trying to do is, okay, we got our established ones. The other ones can be on a wait list for right now. So unless if one of them, can't make it, then we're not accepting any more of that specific breed, kind of
Okay.
vendor.
What type of vendors are you looking for now? You have certain things that you're.
So we do have vendors that sell some supplies, but right now we're trying to kind of look out for a really good supplies vendor. I know I have seen some supplies vendors sell products that aren't what's recommended. They're like calcium sand. That's a no-go. And there's a lot of them that sell that, and when you're selling to new people, they might not know better. And so we want to try to find someone that has correct products. So like no red lights, because that could be damaging to the eyes, no calci sand, no heat rocks and stuff like that. And you know, that a lot of them sell that, and we can't tell vendors, hey, you can vend our show, but you can't sell this. Like, that's not, you can't do that. So we're on the lookout for someone who understands like all that, and is willing to work with selling the correct products, because we want to make sure everybody has a great experience and is not gonna buy something that's gonna end up hurting their pet. Oh, so another one is cages. So we did have Seth Hurst at this past reptile show. He has PVC enclosures, and they're really nice. And, they're great. Some people might not want a PVC cage, they might want a glass cage or something. So that's another vendor that we're trying to look for, is someone who also sells glass cages. Because someone who might just want one gecko and deck it out, they might, the aesthetic, right? So that's another vendor we're trying to look for. But I mean, honestly, outside of the supplies and more cage options, we're pretty set on the variety that the rest of our vendors bring.
Okay.
I think we offer a really good variety of animals at the show. We got some with micro geckos. We have one that sells like driftwood and stuff like that to deck out your cages with. And we got plant vendors. We have, we do have our importers and stuff that do offer a wider selection of some captive bred, some captive born, some wild caught imports and stuff like that. But our importers do take the necessary steps to make sure that these animals are healthy enough to be able to sell too, because they get them established, they make sure they're eating before they go and sell them on the tables. So I mean, honestly, we just have I think we have a really good group of people at our show, so that offer the quality that we're looking for, that they want to offer. And
How do you go about advertising your shows? Social media? Any other ways?
so social media is a huge one. We have done numerous like questionnaires and at our shows, like, how did you hear about us? And we do those surveys is the word I'm looking for. We do surveys. So, we have done it like, how'd you hear about us? And we'd mark down, like, was it through Facebook? Was it through word of mouth? Was it through signs? Was it through a radio? Like, because we've done radio ads before. And, 50% is almost always through social media. 25% has consistently been by word of mouth, and the other 25% has been consistently through our signs. We are going to expand into doing Google ads too, because not everybody's on Facebook, and it could definitely reach a broader range of people. And so we're always looking for new ways to expand our reach to people to bring more people in.
So a quarter of your people actually just drive by, see the sign, and drive in, huh?
Yeah, basically you'll put a sign out, be like, "Oh, Saline Exotic Animal Expo this Saturday. This is the address from, and then would have the time, 10 a.m. to 3 p.m. And, people just look at that, be like, okay, let's remember this, or take a picture of it, or, something like that. And then a lot of people, they get told about these shows. And so then they end up looking it up on Facebook, or they get a screenshot of the flyer or something like that, and they come in through that way, or through our paid advertisements on Facebook. They'll save it, they'll put their response in there, and Facebook is like, oh hey, by the way, you got an event coming up this week, don't forget about it. And then we do a lot of cross posting too to different Facebook groups. That's a big thing. Like, I think on average I'm posting, like, every time I go to advertise by cross posting, I'm posting to 30 plus groups every single time.
Wow.
So it just, the more that you can post, hopefully the better the turnout, because the more people will see it.
How did you pick your hours?
So we kind of looked at what everybody else is, doing, and what really helps too is my co-organizers, Jared and Sabrina, they they were vendors themselves. And they still do occasionally vend other shows, but it really helps because he has insight. Well, they both do. They both have insight on their preferences for shows. And the 10 a.m. to 3 p.m. is just works best because it's mid-morning by the time the doors open, and it's not going so late into the afternoon that the day just kind of drags on for the vendors, because they got unload, get everything set up on their tables. That takes time, and then by the time the end of the day comes, everybody's tired. You're constantly talking throughout the day to people, educating people, hopefully selling some animals too, and that's a lot. It takes a lot out of you. And so by the time 3 p.m. comes, they're done. They want to go home. They want to go put their feet up and rest and get their animals unloaded and taken care of and just chill out for the rest of the day. And so we don't want to push our hours too much. And we think 10 a.m. to 3 p.m. is just kind of what it just works. It's just what works for everybody, and it definitely works for us too, because me, Jared, and Sabrina get into the building at like 5 a.m., set up 3 hours before anybody gets there. And so by the time 3 p.m. rolls around, we're like, okay, we're done too.
Wow, yeah. I
We're
remember
tired. We want
vending
to go home.
before, most shows are many of the shows are 9 or 8 o'clock, and you got to get up so early to go and vend, and you're exhausted by it. And then there's that middle of the
Mm-hmm.
day when things kind of drop off. And then after like 2 or 3 o'clock, people just stop coming in and they stop buying and what have you. So
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
really neat that you have the 10 to 3.
It's always, yeah, that last hour of the show is when everything usually slows down pretty significantly. Like this past show, we still had a really good like amount of people in the building, but the flow of people inside definitely slowed down a lot. And, it's just people want to get their first thing. If they don't get their first thing, then they don't really, they're not really gonna come right before the end of the show. And we do still have people come in right before the end, and some of our vendors have done extremely well with those last minute people coming through those doors. But, we've had people like, why don't you stay open till 4? And it's just like, it doesn't work that well. you know, People usually get if they're not coming in by 2, 3 o'clock, it's because they're getting everything else done throughout their day, and they're probably tired and they're not wanting to make an extra stop. That's just my guess. I don't know if that's actually true for most people, but that's just my guess.
A lot of vendors have specific kind of things where they can tell the time that they sales went about, and they tell me 10 to 2 is the prime time, and anything before, people are just looking around and trying to sort the place out. Anything after, people are just trying to do it. But of course, I'm one of those late people who always gets there a little later and then buys a bunch of stuff because I have a whole list, and then I got to meet a bunch of people. But I'm a little unusual in that sense, so I wouldn't base
Yeah.
it on me. So.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, that 2 to 3, like that 1 hour block from 2 to 3, honestly, in my opinion, is like prime time to come in because it does slow down and you get more opportunity to look at everything because it's not as jam packed. Like, that's the kind of time where you can just kind of like chill at your leisure, check everything out, get your chance to talk to people, meet people, stuff like that. But that's the secret.
All right. Anything else that you want to tell our adventurers today?
Yeah, so our next show for us is going to be in Jackson on April 28th.
Mm-hmm.
It's going to be our first show back in what, 4 months since the last one, or no, 5 months because we didn't have one in December. Most of my math is off. But yeah, I mean, we're going to have one April 28th, and then our next one is going to be May 18th in Saline. I'll have to check the other dates, honestly.
Do you have a website as well, or?
Yeah, for right now, it's only through Facebook. We still have to, like, kind of, there's more things we got to get settled before we look into having, like, an actual website online. But that's going to happen, like, probably in the next, like, 4 or 5 months.
Even a simple website with just had the on it, and just a single page would be helpful.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. What's crazy is if you type in like the Saline show, like Saline Exotic Animal Expo online, there is like numerous pages, like web pages that actually have our dates posted to it. Now, granted, we are going to be changing a couple of the dates, like the May and June show, those dates are changing because when we initially put them out, it was for that first building we were in. And since we moved, we had to change 2 of the dates because of availability. But anyways, if you go online, there's a lot of like groups that have our dates on there, and it's kind of crazy because we didn't know about it. Like our first show in Saline, we were told that we were on the news all the way up in like by Cadillac. They're like, "Oh, go visit the Saline Exotic Animal Expo today." And one of our vendors' father heard it on the TV, and we're like, what? That's crazy. Like, I didn't know that the news about the show spread that far. So it was really cool. And then when we went to go look it up online, there's just like page after page after page after page with our information on it from these different sources. And we're like, what is going on? This is crazy. But it was a really good feeling. So,
Sure.
but we'll eventually get an online page going and stuff like that. I know Jared's working with someone currently. And I think we'll just throw that into the mix of what he's working on too. So,
Sounds good. Any final words for the adventurers?
come check out the shows. I think you'll really enjoy it. You can, if you want to meet me, I'll be there, obviously.
Thank you for being here today. If you enjoyed this adventure and want to be alerted when more are available, please click the subscribe and maybe even the bell button. Thank you.